Next chapter, Forgotten Gods Notes. Next note, Carmac's Notes. This creature is truly fascinating. Unlike anything previously documented by me or my predecessors, its pin-toothed maw lies at the surface nearly motionless like a predatory plant waiting for its unsuspecting prey. Based on the size of the visible portions of its physiology, my best estimations indicate that we are seeing no more than 10% of the creature. What lies beneath the surface may be truly massive and span the entirety of the Korvan sands. It seems insane to even ponder the idea, but it may be so large as to allow someone brave or foolish enough to tread freely inside the beast, depending on the biology of the creature's digestive tract, of course. Similar ventures had been attempted on the giant sandworms of Freinhaul Peninsula. Though those expeditions had proven markedly unsuccessful, this beast is many times larger than any worm on record. This discovery is the culmination of my life's work. I cannot pass up such an opportunity, no matter how outlandish it may seem. All the necessary preparations have been made. My initial observations of the beast indicate it is partially dormant during the hottest hours of the day. This is when we will attempt to make our descent into the gaping maw. Next note, Convergence of the Covenant. I am certain you have heard the whispers as I had. The Mad One is restless, his mind filled with visions of the Burning One's return. If the bonds are broken and his power restored, he could unmake everything. I do not have to remind you of the consequences. The Triumvirate's fate is bound in this moment. Send word along the spider's web. Rally the servants of Bysmeal. I invoke the sacred covenant. The forces of the three must converge in the forgotten lands of the Korvan people. Our forces must unite against this threat. Where divided we shall succumb to the vengeful flames. None must be allowed to defy our summons. Any that do are as much enemy as the forces we contend with and shall be dealt with in kind. We must not allow ourselves to be distracted by the machinations of the ethereals or the bloodletters succumbing to their own doom. The danger they pose pales in comparison to what awaits us if we fail. And if the web has done its part, then the Erhaman survivors will at least stymie their progress long enough for our matters to be settled. Seek out the twin statues. You know of which I speak. The veil there is thin and will serve as an opportune location to begin our work. At the request of the Infinite Eye, I've dispatched the emissary to track down valuable allies who will turn the tide in our favor. I consider their lives expendable in pursuit of victory, but one must not tamper with the whims of fate when they are so clearly written before us. By the three thrones, we will eradicate this threat to our gifts. The world will tremble before the might of the witch gods. Sagan, Vicar of Soliel. Next note, Death to the Usurper. Praises be upon the three. Praises be upon their wisdom, their foresight, and their pity upon mankind. For without their blessings, we would be as worthless husks, devoid of the gifts of the Eldritch realm, and at the mercy of the Luminary hounds. Curses be upon the Usurper, the burning vengeance, the Korvan destroyer. Curses be upon his lust for the Eldritch thrones, the pinnacle of the gods. May he die 1,000 deaths as Dreeg suffers 1,000 festering wounds. May his insides fill with spiders and his eyes turn to ash by eldritch fire. All this we invoke upon the usurper of the eldritch powers, powers meant to be wielded by the true gods and their servants. We march through the blistering sands and into the heart of flame, the whispers of Dreeg in our ears, the hounds of Bysmeal at our side, the black flame of Soliel upon our blades. None shall be spared before our wrath. By the gifts of our patrons, we will reclaim what is theirs, and though our blood shall spill upon the Korvan sands, it will be done in honor of the true masters of humanity. Next note, Harnessing the Forgotten. There are ulterior motives to my selecting this location for our conclave. The Dreeg seers have no doubt felt it by now, and your spiders have suspected. Yes, the veil is thin here, and yes, that enables the cults to better work with the gifts of the Eldritch realm, but another source of power lies buried at our fingertips. At my behest, one of our most gifted scholars in the Veil's mysteries, Mazan, is working on harnessing this power. As you well know, there are other realms, other constructs of the primordial gods. The statues adorning this sacred place are more than just mere decoration. They are conduits between realities and could be manipulated to form a gateway with enough force of will. I believe Mazan is close to a breakthrough, and once he succeeds, we will have an entire realm of untapped potential to harness for our purposes. I for one am eager to see what we uncover if past experience is any indication. Next note, Vanguard must hold. Our efforts to the north have been met with increasing resistance. The fanatics have become aware of our activities and are attempting to push us back. At first, they merely tested our defenses. Watching them pass through our defensive wards was a pleasing sight, and the stench of burning flesh filled the air. Unfortunately, they were more prepared during later incursions, and I regret to say that our wards are no longer holding them back. The Sentinels have suffered some injuries during these initial exchanges, but no casualties. The followers of Kaiman have greater numbers than we suspected, and the powers they are harnessing are unlike any we've dealt with before, and more gruesome. In the most recent strike, a bare-chested behemoth of a man with his face flayed off charged the Vanguard in a whirlwind of blades. His gut was exposed to reveal a churning furnace of molten flames that he unleashed upon our forces. Within moments, he had taken out 4 of our Sentinels without pause. Only when we had finally brought him down by removing his head did we realize that his arms had been removed at the elbows and fused with burning hot blades. To our relief, when he fell, the other fanatics retreated. I dread to think what would happen if several such giants attacked us at once. I pray to Drieg that the time to strike is nearly upon us, and that our main force at the Conclave will meet us here, as without reinforcements the Vanguard will not hold out much longer. But do not interpret this as hesitation. We will fight to the last to keep this point secure in the name of the witch gods. Next note, Visions of Terror. This place we have chosen for our vigil, this conclave, it is a cursed land. The veil screams in agony. The whispers from beyond threaten to unravel reality. Every night I've spent here, the visions of the other side came more frequently and with greater clarity. What I first thought were images of darkness turned out to be much more. Within it were the screams of a million souls, crying out to me, crying out for mercy. As my dreams solidified, I realized that the darkness moved. It writhed like a mass of tentacles endlessly searching for something. The sight of it filled me with terror beyond anything I've ever felt. I awoke gasping for breath and grasping for anything within reach that would remind me that I've left the dream, to the chagrin of my fellow seers sharing the tent. Shaken and unable to sleep, I sought the wisdom of the oracle. To my surprise, or perhaps I should have expected this, my master was already waiting for me inside his tent. Lanterns illuminated him in their flickering light as he sat cross-legged, without his usual regalia, on a rug with tea set out for us. As he stared ahead with his blank eyes, he gave me a tight-lipped smile and motioned for me to sit. Before I could utter a word, he said, "Ugol." I was taken aback and blinked. The oracle continued by describing exactly what I had seen in my dreams, as if he had been there to share them with me. The insatiable night, he called it, the eternal darkness that exists in the beyond. It is primordial, unfathomable to the human mind. We see it as a mass of writhing tentacles, but what it truly is cannot be described in words. Ugol exists to consume everything, its endless pursuit halted only by the light of the celestial stars. I was told that it is a gift and a burden to bear witness to the makings of reality. What I had seen cannot be unseen. When I started visibly shaking, the oracle placed his palm upon my forehead, and for a moment I could swear his eye tattoos were staring at me. Yet I found myself instantly calmed. When I asked what he had done, he would not say, but he offered to teach me a technique to calm myself and banish the darkness from my nightmares. It is a lucid method by which I would conjure my own stars into the dream, brighter than the desert sun. I thanked him for his wisdom and promised to return the next eve for my lesson. As I stood to leave, I glanced in his direction. He was staring ahead, as before, a somber expression on his face. His tea remained untouched. I said no more and closed the tent flap behind me. It would seem my visions have disturbed the oracle as well, but I trust that his judgment and foresight will carry us through whatever darkness looms on the horizon. I pray to Drieg that the oracle's teachings will spare me further nightmares. Next note, Web is Spun. Mistress of the web, the ear to Bysmeal's whispers, I have done all that you have asked. As you wisely surmised, the fanatics known as the Kaiman's Chosen are here, in the Korvan lands. We have tracked their movements from the Arkovian foothills north to Sorrow's Bastion. From there their leader, a former Luminari Inquisitor who now calls himself Father Kaiman, has dispatched his fervent followers to gather relics and to wage war against the Chthonic cult. It appears that he was successful on whatever endeavor he set out to accomplish, as one night we saw him leaving the Bastion with a fraction of his forces. The ones we've surmised were his more staunch followers. They did not travel far, just to a nearby clearing where a wisp of flame manifested itself before them. In a flash, it tore a rift through the very air, much like your gifts bestowed by the schemer, and Kaiman and his ilk vanished into thin air. At that time, we thought the trail had gone cold, but you were correct in dispatching us after we arrived at the conclave. We uncovered remnants of camps on the edge of the desert sands and tracks leading north. As you've surmised, they seem to be after the Valley of the Chosen and the temple beyond. More concerningly, Kaiman's chosen appear to have taken up a new banner, and some of them have been undergoing changes. They branded their foreheads with strange runes and their eyes turned to flame. We've observed some convulsing in their sleep as a gaping furnace opened in their guts. It seems by virtue of being closer to their ultimate goal, they've begun some kind of transformation. Nevertheless, one of our own has infiltrated their ranks and will continue to report back to me with any findings or further disturbing reports. You will also be pleased to know that the Grand Web is working amongst the ranks of the Soliel's and Dreeg's followers. They will make no move without our knowledge, and certainly they will make no discoveries in this land that we cannot take advantage of. By the Spider's will. Eureka of the Shadows. Next note, worthy purpose. Let this sacrifice echo across the conclave that our brother Jaros was found worthy of bearing his life before Soliel's blade. Few are granted the honor and fewer still have the will to accept the burden for the benefit of us all. And so it was with our brother who not only willingly stepped forward to feed Soliel's hunger, he had Soliel's sigils painted upon his bare chest as he paraded himself to the center of the conclave. Larger than life, he stood proudly before Sagan and his curved witchblade and proclaimed to all that today marks the first day of their victory against the Usurper. Jaros kneeled, as was customary, but his eyes never turned away from the vicar's stoic gaze. As was set down upon us by Soliel, Sagan uttered the sacred words and slid his forefinger to paint a rune upon Jaros' forehead. Then the vicar stood behind the sacrifice and placed the sacred blade upon his throat. This was the Chosen's last chance to back down, though to be perfectly honest, such a disgrace would likely end in death anyway. Jaros looked ahead with confidence. His face was beaming with pride, such was his faith. For Sola. He began to cry when Sagan slit his throat and plunged his other hand drenched in black flames into Jaros' chest. Sagan removed the dead man's heart in a swift motion and drank deep of the lifeblood spilling forth. Jaros' body slumped to the ground, his eyes still staring forward. Several attendants saw to his cremation as the vicar delivered the heart to Soliel's shrine. The heart was placed in an ornate bowl and incinerated, and as it burned, the runes upon the shrine grew brighter. Soliel is pleased, Sagan uttered, smiling with bloody lips. Next note, Anorak's journal. Errol's got the three of us working with an odd crew, some bunch of which worshipping fanatics, but I have my trepidations. For one, getting mixed up with such a controversial group may prove more dangerous than it's worth. They also seem like a terribly conflicted lot, all pledging themselves to different deities, none of whom seem to get along very well. They've somehow roped my brothers into joining their little cult, though I suspect those two aren't buying into the mumbo-jumbo the witches are peddling. More likely they think we'll turn a healthy profit by going along with the whole deal. If that's the case, Errol and Andrin are doing an awfully good job hiding it. They're joining in with daily rituals, kowtowing to their new god. It's an odd sight, those two fools pretending they care for anything other than making themselves rich. I wonder how long it will be until they try to get me to join in with them. I haven't had an opportunity to speak with them about it, but deceiving a group of fanatics like this could be dangerous business. For the time being, the witches have kept us well supplied, and there seems to be no shortage of grave robbing they want us to do. I don't exactly know what they're looking for, but they don't seem to have any interest in the usual trinkets. They were rather displeased with our first haul, saying it was all useless junk. We just grabbed what usually sells well, jewelry, anything that looks expensive, but they said to focus our efforts on items that seem to have greater importance, auras, whatever that means. On top of all else, things are heating up in camp. The witches seem to be preparing for something, arguing amongst themselves, making plans in secret. There's a lot of strange people coming and going and some rather concerning rumors about goings-on to the north in the ruins of Korvan City. We don't have any plans to head out there though, at least I hope not. This morning it's off to the Kyran docks for a second run. There's a network of tombs and temples beneath the ruins that the witches seem particularly interested in. We've been down there before and most of those places seemed like they were picked over years ago. But maybe the stuff with auras is still down there. In any case, I'll have my hands full keeping Errol and Andrin out of trouble, as usual. Next note, Bloodsworn Manuscript Excerpt. Asterisk, this parchment appears to have been torn out of some larger tome and is covered in a fresh layer of hastily written notes. What remains is covered in what you assume is human blood. Asterisk, Ketun Thun, Herald of the Darkness, we beseech you. Our blood lord has fallen, and by association with his blunders we were made to suffer. But hear us, master of our blood, for we come bearing an offering. This land, these ruins, they are brimming with power, power which reeks of the enemies of the Dying One. We beseech you with this offering of blood. Come forth. May the shadows of the void follow in your wake, that the eldritch sun be blotted out. And when the void has consumed this fallen kingdom, may we stand beside you with but a taste of your eternal glory. Then we shall go forth in your name and gather blood from the unworthy. The remainder of the text is written in glyphs beyond your understanding. Even peering upon them fills your head with thoughts of murder and spilled blood. Next note, the burning shores. I cannot fathom what fate has befallen us. The water in the bay burns as if it were liquid flame. The countless ships docked along the piers consumed in an instant like twigs in a blacksmith's furnace. The hellish flames reach beyond the bay and threaten our city, our homes. I still hear the screams of sailors as they burned alive, and the chaos in the streets as the flames spread. My body is numb with fear, but my mind is racing. I cannot comprehend the sights I bore witness to in the dawn's light, or what would bring such unimaginable tragedy upon us. The bay's flames linger in my mind like an unending nightmare. Were it not for Jeren's calm mind and quick action, I may have perished in the initial frenzy that ensued. While others panicked and fled, trampling each other in the process, Jeren gathered us up and placed us in his wagon with a small satchel of supplies. Without delay or thought for himself, he sent the horse into a gallop towards the exit gates. He refused to come, saying that he had to stay and try to help others. As refugees continue to gather at the Temple of Osir, I've seen no sign of my dear husband. I do not know what has become of him, but I fear our future may be just as bleak. Carrot in, the skies to the north are burning. Red-hot pillars of flame leap towards a dark ashen cloud that hangs over Korvan City. Whatever curse had stricken the Kyran docks appears to continue there as well. I pray that we will find safety to the south. Next note, Captain Freinhaul's log. After more than a month's travel, we've reached the port at Kyran. And a hard month it was. The crew has suffered more than they deserve. During our first week at sea, a freak storm flooded the hold and ruined a fair portion of our better provisions. The steward's been forced to dole out smaller portions than I'm sure he'd like. There were more than a few threats to his life come mealtimes. To add to the lean conditions, a particularly bold band of native pirates attempted to board the ship from a small canoe as we passed near the Tarkan Islands. I didn't know what they were thinking at the time, as they had little chance of sacking the ship. Not a one of them was fully dressed, and only 2 of the 5 were armed, if you can call it that. They carried no more than roughly fashioned spears. Little did we know they were so lethal. The crew's response was expectedly concise, and the attempted raid was stopped almost before it started. However, 2 of the crew, Barkin the deckhand and Rhenet our new swabby, sustained minor injuries from the incident. Both took ill and died no more than a day later. It turned out those half-naked bastards were planning to poison us all in our sleep. They got what they deserved, hogtied and keel-hauled. Some of the crew suggested less savory ends, but it's important not to allow the rabble to run rampant in such situations. As it is, I allowed them to keep the hands. It's a foul practice, if you ask me, but they do fetch a fine coin if you can source the right buyer. I'm sure the old bosun Yorhun will have no trouble finding someone to sell them to here. This is to be the first of 3 nights at port as the ship's cargo is sold and her hold replenished. I've given the crew their leave, which I am sure they will take at local taverns and homes of ill repute. As is well-deserved, no doubt. I shall tend to the ship's business and attempt to source cargo for our return journey. The Kyran port is truly a sight to behold. Many times larger than any this captain has seen in his many years at sea. Hundreds of ships make landfall, and just as many, with bellies full of cargo, wait at the mouth of the river. The docks churn like a well-oiled machine, and the pristine city beyond glistens in the moonlight as if bathing in its rays. Yet, in my short time ashore, I have seen the all but hidden evidence of the dark underbelly that bolsters any successful port. Back alley dealings, wealthy merchants treading on the less fortunate, a ship whose hold is overflowing with bound and chained folk, stolen from a far-off land. I am certain our return journey will be a profitable one, though I hope to haul a less unsavory cargo. Next note, the desert calls. Her burning waves beckon, calling sweetly in my ear. I see her in my thoughts like a golden ocean laid bare before me. Her grand expanse conceals countless treasures hidden tightly away, left for only the most intrepid lover to reveal. Though her dangers abound, she lingers in my mind, haunting me as I sleep. There are many others I have loved of beauty beyond compare, whose pleasures weaken lesser men, but only she has gripped my heart. And though she is the cruelest of lovers, starving and burning those who seek her pleasures, I shall return to her. For the desert calls to me, and I shall always answer. Next note, Jeren's travelogue, first entry. We set out yesterday to make our way over the charred rim and down into the valley below. It is a wild place where towering basalt formations jut from the ground like the bones of an ancient beast. I don't know what happened here, but it appears as if the earth turned itself inside out, spewing its jagged entrails across the valley floor. The land rests now, but signs of ancient turmoil abound. I must say I am pleasantly surprised to find that Amal's map has been accurate. When he bought the old rag from a wandering junk peddler and then tried to convince me to join his little treasure hunt, I was skeptical to say the least. After all, what kind of traveling trash merchant carries a genuine treasure map, for a few measly iron bits no less? Even if the map was real, I thought, what business do Amal and I have trekking through a burning desert to raid some poor soul's long-forgotten grave? But he's really come through this time. The map is in fact real and, remarkably, Amal has led us this far without incident. According to the map, it won't be more than a half-day's journey to the place they once called the Valley of the Chosen, or so Amal says. I'm relying entirely on him as I cannot read the supposed ancient language the map is written in. How he can is beyond me. There are signs of a once mighty civilization everywhere. I've seen buildings, statues, tombs, and temples. Some stand as if they were erected yesterday, but most have fallen prey to the ravages that tore through this land long ago. If I didn't know better, I'd say the earth itself had reared up to lay waste to the structures built here, intentionally razing some and leaving others untouched. It is an unnerving thought, no doubt. I do not know what happened to this place, or to the people that must have inhabited it, or why no one has returned to reclaim it. Amal tells me stories of cataclysmic events, the roiling hot blood of the earth pouring over the land, unnatural beasts risen to exact the vengeful punishment of a scorned god. I honestly don't know if he's making it up to scare me or if he genuinely believes that's what happened here. In the end, all that matters is that everyone left in a hurry and they left a whole lot of valuables behind. If it is true, and it appears to be, this will be a very profitable journey after all. Next note, Jeren's travelogue, second entry. Last night we reached the Badlands around the Valley of the Chosen where we made camp along a jagged ridgeline. Just over the crest, as far as the eye could see, the harsh volcanic landscape was dotted with tomb entrances and monuments whose golden inlays sparkled in the bright moonlight, all of which were centered along a main corridor of grand burial crypts. It was an equally exhilarating and daunting sight as I was not looking forward to traversing volcanic rock and leaping over molten rivers. And I have to say there's been some strange goings-on as we draw nearer to our goal. This morning I could swear that the earth itself shook me awake, and in the last fitful moments of sleep I dreamed of being consumed by fire, sinking deeper and deeper into an endless ocean of flame. As I jerked back to the realm of the waking, I saw Amal sleeping like a freshly suckled pig, clutching his empty rum cask like the teat of a generous mother. It must have been in my head, perhaps an anxious dream brought on by the anticipation of the final leg of our journey and the riches that might be buried in the valley ahead. But later, as we broke camp, I noticed something very peculiar. We arrived last night well after sunset, and I would have bet my life we made our camp at the foot of a massive statue. This morning, it was missing. I was dumbstruck. Not only was it gone, but there were gargantuan footprints leading away from it like those of a man wearing heavy boots, only many times larger. They were deep, and the stride was long as if the statue had just walked off in the night or some massive man had slung it over his shoulder and made off with it. When I told Amal, he seemed surprised at first, but then brushed it off. He insisted there was no statue, that the full moon played a cruel trick on me. I think he saw it too, I'm certain of it, but he's so focused on finding treasure that he won't admit to any distractions. If that weren't enough, as we made our way down into the valley, I could swear I saw an entire caravan of men and women dressed in long gray robes and heavy armor off in the distance. They were traveling northward along the ridgeline next to the tombs, chanting as they went. By the time I got Amal to stop gaping at the gold inlay on the temple door we were going to pry open, he missed seeing them entirely. I feel as though I'm losing my mind, but I'm quite positive we are not alone here. I don't suppose it matters much at this point. We've reached our goal. The tomb marked on Amal's map is right beneath our feet. This one, among so many, supposedly holds grand riches. Perhaps once we're inside, I can breathe easy away from all the weirdness happening out here, if we can figure out how to get the damn thing open. Next note, Korvan Expedition, first entry. The writings gathered here are to serve as record of our journey to reach the lost Korvan city. This expedition is the culmination of a lifetime of study by myself, Thomas Peterson, and my esteemed colleague Roderick Crane. Together we have focused our efforts on ancient lore that speaks of a magnificent city of gold, hidden deep in the burning desert, a city whose people and culture vanished generations ago. By following the works of Rion the Scholar, sparse regional folklore, and a number of cryptic religious texts, we were able to piece together a potential location for the lost city. From Rion's writings, we know that the main port of entry to the Korvan civilization was a place called the Khairan Docks, a massive coastal city positioned in a protective bay just inland of a large river delta. However, recovered Korvan folklore claims that the waters of this river delta and the protective bay where Khairan was situated turned to flame and were burned away during the supposed cataclysmic event that ended the civilization. After speaking with a number of shipping merchants and retired sailors, we have pinpointed a location that fits this description. A strip of land where the desert meets the sea, just north of Cape Arene. The terrain and weather here are apparently so treacherous that few have ventured far from the coast. It should not go unmentioned that funding for our expedition was provided by a number of wealthy individuals from both Erhaman and Malmouth. It does concern me that their interests in the lost city may not align with ours, and they have sent a retinue of individuals to monitor our progress and look after their investment. I am concerned that they may attempt to interfere if things don't seem to be going their way. Roderick assures me that, whatever their intentions, we will not allow them to waylay us from our goal. Though, I suspect he's told them they are likely to find some sort of treasure or otherwise valuable items to make it seem worth investing in our expedition. And so our journey begins. Next note, Korvan Expedition, second entry. Day 23. Until today, our journey has been an exercise in the mundane. I have lost track of time as I watch the ship's crew go about their routine day in and day out. I feel more than a bit useless, but the captain has explained, a number of times, that our involvement will only make his crew less efficient. So I sit, read, watch the clouds pass overhead and review my notes over and over again. That all changed this morning shortly after dawn when I was violently awoken by the sound of cannon fire. The shattering boom gave me such a start that I fell out of my hammock. When I rushed above deck, the scene was somewhere between utter chaos and military precision. Before I could determine what was happening, the captain ordered Roderick and I below deck. Later, when the fracas had subsided, I had a chance to speak with him. Evidently, the Dawn Watchman spotted another ship with no colors flying, a sure sign of piracy, the captain said. Instead of risking an attack, he decided to go on the offensive and begin firing as soon as the ship was in range. Whatever he did, it worked, and the other ship fled. However, it appears this is a common tactic among pirates of the region. They follow ships and attempt an attack at night when the crew is less alert. I shudder to think that our expedition could have come to such a grisly end before we even reached the barren shores. Day 27. The captain tells me we're nearing our destination, no more than a day's sailing left, and then an indeterminate number of days searching the desert for the lost city. The retinue of babysitters sent by our investors have been asking a number of peculiar questions about the burial habits of the Korvan people, and about the types of objects we might hope to find there, none of which I have answers to. I caught one of them reading an ancient-looking text of some sort the other day. Aurenial Arcanum, the name read. It is a volume I am unfamiliar with, though if I didn't know better, I'd say it was exactly the kind of thing that could attract luminary attention. He snatched the book closed and hid it in his jacket when I asked what he was reading. His scowl said it all. Peculiar indeed. Next note, Korvan Expedition, third entry. Day 29. It has been 2 tedious and nerve-wracking days since we made landfall. Our time is spent cautiously picking our way through arid canyons and barren valleys with no sign of civilization. We are forced to travel huddled together with armed guards at our flanks, a cumbersome but necessary measure. One of our porters was mauled by an unknown predator while relieving himself. We must be incredibly cautious to prevent further attacks. I am no expert in the study of animals, but I have witnessed many here that defy my understanding of the natural world. Massive reptiles skulking in the dunes. Flying predators with wingspans as large as a ship. Beetle-like insects the size of a man. This is a place of deep primordial energy. I feel certain we are on the right path. Day 31. Today, we have reached the first true evidence of civilization. The lotus symbolism and crumbled remains of guardian statues that I've previously only seen depicted in texts made it abundantly clear that these were indeed the remnants of the Korvan people. Around midday, we walked clear of the insipid and deathly dry desert, and there laid out before us were the sprawling ruins of a once glorious city. Beyond the sand-covered husks of buildings, I could make out the remnants of a massive port and the bones of ancient ships now resting on the dry salt bed. There was no doubt about it. These were the Kyran docks, the port that connected Korvan City to the luxurious trade routes that brought power and riches untold to these shores. Beyond it, the now barren bay that served as its connection to the outside world. Our efforts are paying off. We are now on the path once trod by the Eldritch Sun himself. Day 32. We've uncovered an ancient bathhouse and temple complex at the center of the port city. Our accompaniment insisted on exploring the ruins and carefully cataloging every grain of sand that appeared unique to them. I tried to impress upon them that this was not the intended destination of our expedition, and that it was not the time for delays, not when we were so near, not after so many years of preparation. I will not allow their petty attempts to recover meaningless artifacts to stall our progress. Perhaps the time for more drastic action has come. I will speak with Roderick in private, beyond prying eyes. We will reach an agreement as to the appropriate next steps. Next note, Korvan Expedition 4th entry. Day 33. Now we are free from all hindrance, free of the pretense of money-making and investors who were so concerned with their returns that they shackled us with a league of babysitters to watch over us. This morning, as our cohorts made their way back into the bathhouse for yet another day of sorting and cataloging the belongings of dead people, Roderick and I barred the doors shut from the outside. I'm brimming with glee to think of the looks on their faces as they return from a long day of grave robbing only to discover that their treasure trove shall also be their tomb. We are, of course, alone now and without protection. However, traveling will be easier with just the two of us, and I have prepared a number of wards that should keep us well hidden and protected from the ravenous wildlife. Onward to the temple in the burning heart of Korvan City. Day 35. I am awe-stricken. I stand here, after so desperate a journey, at the foot of a grand temple devoted to Yorvok. The city of his name stretches out in all directions. Its buildings in ruins, collapsed as if kneeling to pay tribute to the Eldritch God. The scars of his wrath run deep through the very foundations of the infrastructure, evidence of the cataclysm which claimed these people centuries ago. There are ancient rivers of stone now cooled and crystallized into black glass. Great upheavals of jagged rock which pierce buildings and form monuments to his anger. All lie in ruin but for the temple. There, at its heart we shall find what we have come for, a power immutable, a wealth greater than all of the riches of mankind. This we shall claim for ourselves. Next note, Korvan Expedition, final entry. Were the tales of Korvan legends untrue? Were we led astray by false promises? What of the white-hot energy that once warmed the foundations of Korvan City? There is nothing, no revelation, no great power. The temple runs cold, its heart a hardened mass of blackened glass. The great god who once dwelt here is gone. To where? I do not know. His fate is irrelevant to me. I care only for the power that lingered here, and it is all gone. I am alone now, a lifetime of work and friendship gone, wasted. Roderick lies dead, struck down by the ancient guardian of this place, the only indication that this place was ever worth a damn. Roderick gave his life so that I could reach the heart of the temple. His sacrifice was rendered pointless as the history that led us here proved to be no more than fables. I am certain a great power dwelt here once, but it is long gone, perhaps claimed by another. There is nowhere left for me to go, no reason for me to pursue an existence beyond these walls. And so I shall perish here as well, with the knowledge that my life's work, my very purpose, was to waste. Or perhaps I should return to the guardian that felled my friend and allow it to take me as well, a final tribute to the Eldritch son of old. Next note, missing shipments. I don't know what the temple stewards are thinking. Do they believe no one will notice, or do they simply not care? But I see right through their little game. Taxes are rising, to fund temple affairs they say, all while they spend our hard-earned gold on exotic goods and drink. When I missed a shipment of Vorian wine last week, for the second month in a row, I personally made the trip to Kyran to inquire with my importer. After a fair bit of coercion and no small amount of coin, he told me that a temple attendant signed the cargo manifest and then made off with my wine. I then spoke with a number of other local sellers, and it seems they too have been missing product they've been expecting through the Kyran caravan. I do not mean to imply that they are appropriating the goods, certainly not. They are in fact not only paying for our wares but also bribing importers to keep quiet about their little dealings. A fine waste of our tax money, no doubt. I mean to take this up with the Merchant Guild as soon as possible, and I implore you to do the same. It is about time a voice of power in this region ruffled the feathers of a few ordained officials. Next note, Missive to Elders of Ulzuin's Temple. Esteemed elders, I wish to express my deepest concerns in regards to the recent actions of our patron and guardian, the divine Ulzuin. I realize that it is not our place as mortals to judge the behavior of the gods, for their whims are beyond our limitations to understand, but this course of events warrants apprehension. Since his return, the divine has not been himself. He has ever been on the bottle that our temple stock cannot replenish quickly enough. I've been forced to instruct our aspirants to seize incoming shipments of wine before they can be claimed by local merchants. But even that is not enough to sate his bloated appetite. A Chiron caravan was rerouted to the temple on a daily basis, bringing in fresh courtesans for the pleasures of our patron. I've received numerous complaints from the Merchant Guild regarding the seizure of shipments in their caravan, but these voices were quickly silenced when I invoked Ulzuin's name in their presence. I imagine none of this sounds alarming on its own. However, more recently the divine has taken an unusual interest in a particular maiden of the temple. She is a young and ambitious priestess, and I admit the mighty Ulzuin has good taste. Her brilliant emerald eyes shine underneath that raven black hair, and her face glows with lustful desire. At first, I wrote it off as another of the divine's conquests, but he has begun to shun others in her favor. At times, our own attendants are denied access to Ulzuin's chambers so that she may tend to his wounds and wishes personally. I braved the Celestial's wrath and suggested that it may be dangerous for a god to allow a single mortal to grow so close to him when so many are in need of his guidance and protection. Even in his weakened state, Ulzuin hurled a stone brazier in my direction with ease, damaging the mosaic upon the wall and turning the brazier into mere rubble. I dare not show my face to him again until his anger has subsided. It is clear to me now that this young priestess has consumed the divine's attention, like a spider ensnaring a victim in its web. If we cannot speak sense to Ulzuin, then we must keep eye upon her, learn of her methods and motives. It is possible that she merely desires to taste the pleasures of divine flesh, but I've never seen our mighty Lord so enthralled by a mortal. I call upon all my brethren to take heed of this warning and join me in my endeavor without drawing the ire of our patron. But if Ulzuin cannot protect himself from these mortal pursuits, then we will need to take the necessary measures, for the good of the Korvan people, of course. Next note. My hands are not my own. I write this final letter so those who may find this know what had transpired. Know that I am not a sinister man, and would never murder anyone in cold blood. But through some evil dwelling within this place, that is precisely what had happened. I came to these lands with my two companions, Harnan and Balik. After weeks of travel through accursed sands, we at last came to see the spires of Korvan ruins. They were stabbing up from the haze of the horizon like the rotten ribs of some great dead god. It was not until we stepped foot inside the first tomb that I began hearing the whispers. I kept asking what the others were muttering about, but they would laugh, saying that I was merely hearing things. As our days of digging and opening tombs continued, I became convinced that they were conspiring to slit my throat. I refused to sleep. I grew weary and delusional. The whispers kept gnawing at my mind. Yesterday, as we made our way into the latest tomb, the voices took their toll. We had found a small opening on the surface through which we were able to descend via rope. As soon as my feet touched the dusty tiles, however, I was but a passenger in my own body, trapped behind my own eyes. As my companions moved into the inky depths, my hands reached for the rope and soaked it with lamp oil. I screamed to warn the others, but I had no voice. I stared in horror as our only means of escape vanished in a brief blaze. Deeper inside, I found Harnan overlooking a golden railing near a waterfall. My hands came up into my vision as if to push him. I tried to fight my arms down. I commanded my mouth to make any noise, but nothing came of it. I was powerless and could only watch as his hands shot out in desperation, grasping for anything within reach, the railing, the wall, me. His eyes met mine with the final fearful question, why? Then he was gone, tumbled over the railing and out of sight into the ravine. Balik was not far from my grisly deed. I found him admiring the intricate work of gold-encrusted statue. The figure was frightening, with too many arms gripping a razor-sharp halberd as if at the ready to defend the tomb. There was an eerie quality of unlife about it that made my blood run cold. In a flash, my hands were wrapped around Balik's arms, and I lifted him with inhuman strength way up into the air before forcing his back onto the statue's weapon. I released him and watched as he slowly slid down the length of the halberd, his blood pouring down along the shaft and pooling at the foot of the statue. It was at that moment when my last friend was dead that whatever spell had enthralled me had ended. Freed from my mental prison, I screamed and wailed and pounded on the cold stones like a distraught child. For a brief moment, I could swear I saw a withered face clad in golden armor staring back at me, but then it was gone. I can't say when or how, but I pulled Balik down off the statue. Nor do I know how long I lay there holding my dead friend. My mind was broken. There was no hope of escape. I saw to that. By my own hand, I became trapped down here to waste away and rot to bone with my fallen companions. I needed to write this. If not for myself, then for my friends. I can only pray their spirits know in their hearts that it was not me, and they will greet me with forgiveness when I see them beyond the veil. Gods preserve me. My hands were not my own. Next note, Naiema's letter to Yorhun. My dearest Yorhun, we're nearing the end of our journey now. I can see the oasis in the distance calling to us like a great beacon in a sea of sand. It cannot come soon enough. Another day in the burning desert and Yhania may lose her mind. As it is, her spirit dwindles. She concerns herself with inevitability. She's been asking what will happen once we reach the temple and what will come of her if she is chosen by the priests. I try to explain that it would be a great honor if she was chosen out of all the young women who make the journey this year. But she questions the necessity of it, asking why she should give herself to Horran. I try to offer reason, but I must admit my faith falters. I do not have your strength. I see the same in the others who follow their daughters on pilgrimage. Like me, I am sure they remember the journey as young women, the anticipation and fear they felt. I remember questioning my mother's faith as well as she guided me to the temple steps. It seemed unfathomable that she would so willingly give me away, but she remained stoic and devout. I fear I am not the mother she was. How am I to leave my precious Lotus? How can I just give away Yhania if she is chosen? If only I could tell her how I truly feel. If I could just embrace her and cry together with her one last time. But I know I cannot. I must remain strong for her. I know how important it is for us to give thanks to Horran, to pay tribute to all that he provides. But my love, it is so terribly hard to see the beautiful young woman our precious Yhania has become and to imagine our life without her. I must go now to begin the final preparations as we approach the temple. I have mended the dress I wore on pilgrimage and fitted it to Yhania. She will be the fourth of her name to wear it. Perhaps it will bring her luck. She will be so beautiful in it. Should she be chosen, I am certain Horran will be pleased. By the time you read this, the ceremony will be over and I shall be making my journey home. Forgive me, but I pray that I will not be making the trip alone. Yours always, Naiema. Next note, Rhenet the Rat God. Rhenet was not always a rat and did not always preside over the vermin and lowly creatures of the Korvan Basin. He was once a powerful and proud man, a merchant whose wealth rivaled any who bask in the light of Ron. But he was not born into the life of wealth and power. No, he was born a diseased and lowly vagrant to a widowed mother with nothing more to give him than her faith in the Eldritch Sun. And so, unable to care for her sickly child, she prayed to her god and pledged her own life so that Rhenet would be spared the plight that was his birthright. The desperate mother's prayers were answered and miraculously the infant grew to become a healthy child. As a young man, Rhenet was conscripted to the service of a trade ship where it is said that even the cruel sea showed him favor. He grew strong and clever in his service, and his skill as a sailor brought him much renown. He worked furiously to honor the life he was given, and through his drive and dedication became the captain of the ship to which he served. His success at sea was so great that he would one day return to the Chiran docks and from there command an armada of ships that sailed in his name. It was from this position of power that he built his grand wealth and from which he began to forget his humble origins. The success of his life so tainted his ego that Rhenet began to believe he was destined for greatness, that a life such as his could not be a coincidence. He sought greater power and forgot the gift which was given. Those who served or were loyal to Rhenet showered him with their adoration, and his pride grew with his wealth. The shade of his origins was all but forgotten as Rhenet proclaimed himself the master of the seas and commissioned the first of many temples to be constructed in his honor. Quickly, sailors and seafarers began paying tribute, leaving riches and treasures at these sites of worship. It was said that the favor of Rhenet bestowed good fortune upon those who took to the sea. Some even perceived him as a god of the waters, an ascendant whose legend spread beyond even the Korvan waters. But the grand hubris of Rhenet drew the ire of his benefactor. And so, the Eldritch Sun left his throne, disguising himself as an elderly vagrant so he could walk amongst the people of the Korvan Basin. There he heard the adulation for Rhenet, listened as the people spoke of the man as if he stood among Korvok's chosen, those few mortals whose service and dedication to the Eldritch Sun had earned them a place aside his throne. This rightly enraged the divine, and in his disguised form he sought court with the self-appointed god of the seas. In a grand temple built in his name, Rhenet met with the old man. He laughed at the sight of the sickly and broken creature before him. "What have you to give the master of the seas, you poor old fool?" asked Rhenet. I have come to remind you of the life you should have lived, the man said meekly. I am you as you should have been, were it not for the kindness of the Eldritch Son. Rhenet laughed once again. You have come here to threaten me? Who are you to speak for the gods? How dare you? And with that the old man's voice boomed, shaking the earth beneath their feet. His form twisted and grew as he spoke, and a blistering heat washed over Rhenet, burning away his clothes, peeling and bubbling his flesh. I do not come to threaten. I have come to collect upon the gift which was given. The searing heat cleansed Rhenet of his pride, and he cowered before the towering figure. Forgive me, begged Rhenet. I did not know. What have you to give me, you poor little creature? The figure boomed. I give my life, cried Rhenet. Indeed, but death is too small a price. No, you shall serve me as the lowliest of creatures you have always been. You will hold court over those who saw you as a god. With those final words, Rhenet's body collapsed upon itself, twisting, tearing and grinding until finally he appeared as a massive diseased rat. His temples were brought to ruin in an instant, and from the rubble emerged a swarm of rats. All of those who had followed the master of the sea, all who had pledged their loyalty to him or begged for his favor were cursed to live out their days as vile vermin in the service of the rat god. Take heed of the story of Rhenet, for all things that we cherish in life are gifts of the Eldritch Son. Next note, Scorched Note. There's nowhere left to go, nowhere to run. I got separated from Amal when a cave-in blocked the passageway into the depths of the tomb. In his typical unnatural calm, he said to go on, that we'd meet up again further down. But as I walked, the earth began to shake. Groaning and rumbling, the bedrock beneath the temple cried out like a waking beast. I panicked and began to run, but every step seemed to aggravate the beast further. I made it less than 20 feet before the shaking brought me to my knees. I continued to crawl, scraping my arms against the jagged stone floor, with no concept of where I was going, no plan of escape. With a bone-shattering crack, the floor of the temple opened like a gaping maw, revealing the white-hot river of flame below. I could not have imagined the depth of terror that consumed me in that moment as Amal's desperate screams echoed through the passage behind me. I somehow summoned the courage to move and dragged myself away from the searing heat. For a time, I cowered there as the tomb shook around me. Its groans and cracks resembled an oppressive voice that called out to me, that called out to all living things from the depths of the fiery river that flowed around me. Then, as the shaking subsided, there was calm. I could still hear other cracks and booms in far-off places, but the temple I lay in was still. Now there is nothing but the sizzle and drone of the molten earth that now defines the island of solid rock that will be my final resting place. There are no riches, no treasure, only burning death and the voice that beckons me into the flames. Next note, Sea of Dust, page 1. Our journey into the basin of the long-dead Kyran Bay is off to a bitter start. After several days into the trackless dunes, we found ourselves delayed by a massive sandstorm. 3 days it blew, and twice I had to dig my way out to keep from being buried. Our guide was not so lucky. It looked as if his tent had ripped at some point in the night, and all the sand poured in on top of him. Fariz thought we should turn back, but the rest of us were in agreement to press on. With the extra water and food of having one less mouth, we should be fine. The promise of wealth is well worth the risk. Next note, Sea of Dust, page 2. Yesterday the caravan wagons were lost, sucked into the dunes in a burst of air and sand. Many of our porters and some of my dearest friends were gone in an instant. I had heard tales of quicksand, but never in my worst dreams could I have imagined how truly horrifying the reality is. The stink that filled the air was ghastly, acidic, and full of rot. How many over the centuries had been pulled into that unimaginable death? What fools we were. Only my friend Fariz saw the danger, and we ignored him and followed our greed into death's jaws. Last night, he and I argued and fought, taking out our frustrations on each other. This morning I started at my friend lying there in the blood-soaked sand, my knife still plunged into his heart. I was alone with the vultures circling overhead. Next note, Sea of Dust, page 3. I climbed to the top of a massive dune in hopes to get a view of anything. A rock, a landmark, a bird, anything. From the top of the ridge my eyes teared in despair. The Sea of Dust stretched to the horizon, vanishing into a shimmering wall of cloudless blue. Water ran out yesterday, and the blinding headache makes it impossible to think clearly. Lost in these endless dunes, I no longer favor my chances. Next note, security concerns. As this is now my 4th request for an increased guard retinue for our caravans, consider this a formal complaint, and if my concerns are not addressed in a forthright manner, you can be certain that my voice will be heard by the Merchant Guild. I've been told my previous correspondence had been ignored due to a lack of evidence of increased criminal activity on the Kyran docks to Korvan City route, but I assure you, criminals are the least of our concerns. I imagine the thugs we normally contend with are facing the same constant onslaught we are. There has been a staggering increase in wildlife activity across the entirety of the Korvan Basin. The natural predators are emboldened, attacking single travelers and sometimes the caravans themselves in broad daylight. In all my time managing the caravan, I have seen nothing like it. They appear crazed as if driven mad by something. In addition, there have been numerous sightings of previously unknown and peculiar beasts, seen traveling in packs, stalking caravans through the deepest desert. One of my most trusted drivers even reported a griffin matriarch down on the valley floor. What could possibly drive those behemoths down from their lofty perches? Whatever it is, we need to secure the caravans or risk shipments stopping altogether. I've lost such large quantities of product and men over the last month that trade ships have begun to complain about their deliveries not reaching merchants in the city. It's becoming more and more difficult to hire new hands because of rumors flying around of what happened to the previous crews. We must have more guards to secure the caravans. Surely you magistrate types can imagine your life without fine wine and graceful silks. Let us not forget that it is the caravans and their courageous drivers that bring such luxuries, and it is the wealth of these very caravans that fund your comfy seats. Respectfully, Rollin, Caravan Master. Next note, the sting. The parchment is covered in what appears to be dried-up human bile. Day 4. The Korvan people have been generous with their treasures. Hardly a threat in sight. I had to use the fire of my camp to scare off something lurking in the dark last night, but otherwise it had been an easy journey so far. Day 5. Today, I was making my way back to the camp when something stung me. Made me feel a bit dizzy. I know a good night's sleep will help me to feel right as rain. Nothing to be concerned about. Day 6, or is it 7? I am not sure how long I've slept, but something is definitely wrong. My lips are cracked. My gums are bleeding. And the headache, my gods, the headache is blinding. The skin feels like it's crawling. Everything hurts so bad I can barely move. What manner of demon stung me? Day 9. I've managed to crawl my way back to the horse and travel back south out of the basin, but the symptoms have not abated. Twice now I've woken in agony, burning up. My skin moves on its own as if something was moving beneath the surface. Day 10. I've watched in horror as a fat maggot tore through the flesh of my abdomen from the inside. They're inside me. By the gods, they are feasting while I still live. Next note, the Trials of Horran. All who drink of the waters and bathe in their cleansing currents shall give thanks to Horran and be indebted. For it is the blood of his love that gives liquid life to the valley of the Eldritch Sun. Before the walls of the temple gleamed in the light of Ron, before the first of the Korvan people arrived to build the foundations of their faith, there was only Horran. Scorned and persecuted by his people for the depth of his faith in the God of gods, Horran fled to the burning desert to seek a life of devotion and solitude. For a time, the desert provided for him as it had not provided for any creature before him. There, Horran lived happily and spent his waking hours meditating upon his faith. In time, as do all virile creatures, Horran grew lonely. And so he prayed to our Eldritch patron, pledging all he possessed for the pleasures of companionship. As the glow of Atef graced the burning sands, he fell ill and, though a cool night drew upon him, the heat of the day still burned in his skin. His god bade him sleep, and as he slept a feverish vision overtook him. At daybreak, Horran awakened from his dream and set upon his quest. With his sole possession, Aneth, the goat which had given the best of its years to run thick with milk for him, and whose offspring he had gorged himself upon, he marched deeper into the desert. The burning light of Ron weighed heavily on him that morning, and for 7 days hence he marched without food or rest. On the 5th day, Aneth, like many creatures before it, succumbed to the heat and could go no further. With waning strength, Horran carried the beast and cared for it until his body would serve him no more. There, at the end of his journey, Horran collapsed and prayed to the Eldritch Sun for mercy. His god commanded he laid dead Aneth, to slit the beast's neck and drain its blood upon the sands, and Horran did as his master asked. As the crimson waters of Aneth's life ran out upon the sand, it hissed and burned in the midday sun. From the pool of burning life there arose a woman. Yhania she was called, and she poured upon Horran the love for which he had so yearned. Together Yhania and Horran knew only ecstasy, and for a time they were happy. But their love bore no fruit, and so they once again prayed to their god to sate their desires. Thusly Yhania was born. a child of such immense beauty that Ron and Atef both became jealous of how the light of the sun and of the moon danced and sparkled in her eyes. Yhania and Horran were happy once more. But there was a gift that was given and a price that was yet to be paid, and so the desert turned against them. Struggle and strife beset Yhania and Horran. Food aged and rotted at their touch. Water turned to sand as they drank, and young Yhania fell ill of hunger. With nowhere to turn, Horran begged his god for mercy, and the Eldritch Sun answered. But to save the life of Yhania, there was a price that needed to be paid. Horran once again did as his master bade him, and gathered up the blade which had slain Aneth. Then, as he stood there hovering over the bed of Yhania, the jagged and terrible blade raised high above him, Horran's faith faltered. He could not take the life of his love, not even to save Yhania. Horran turned the blade upon himself and drew its claw-like edge across his throat, but it made no mark. Then, Yhania called out and clutched desperately at her neck, the red life seeping out between her fingers. Horran ran to her side, but it was too late. The warm blood flowed from her body and pooled in the sand beneath his feet. From the pool of Yhania's life there burst a ceaseless spring of cleansing water. The Eldritch Sun had once again answered his prayers, but Horran's life was not his own to take. Horran bathed Yhania in the water of the spring, and she was healed. But the lovely child would never forgive him for the death of her mother. As the cost for his greed, Horran was cursed with ceaseless life such that he might remember the death of his beloved Yhania for all eternity, and so that one day he might hold Yhania in his arms as she too drew her final breath. Such is the price of godhood. Next note, Vizier Erhaman's note. The temple grows cold. No longer does the warmth of its heart wash over the city below. I do not know what has transpired, what could possibly cause such an event, but the patrons of the lesser temples have begun to notice. Those who come to pay homage approach me after prayer with questions I cannot answer. Have we angered Yorvok? Has the Eldritch Sun waned? They are rightfully concerned and scared. However, these are the types of emotions which spur wavering faith and thoughts of dissent. There are even some who speak openly against the temple. Though they are few in number, I am concerned that recent events may embolden them. They have the potential to become the rotting core at the center of a larger movement. In the meantime, I have pleaded to the elders for guidance, for words of calm that I might share with the patrons of the temple. They give no notice to my anxieties. I am told to continue on as I always have, for Korvok's flame is with us as certainly as the sun rises each day. The Eldritch Sun works in ways I do not hope to comprehend, but we must take heed when the populace becomes restless. The foundations of our city, of our very faith, must not be shaken. I will do more than just offer the people words. I will give them a spectacle, a grand sacrifice to the heart of the temple. Next note, Writings of Rion the Scholar, first entry. I must admit, this place is truly a jewel in the desert. In my travels, I have been to the farthest reaches of the world, seen and experienced much. Sadly, most sights did not live up to their own tales. This place, however, is a marvel that exceeds even the grandest of stories. Transcribing its beauty and grandeur may prove challenging even for me. I arrived via ship at the Kyran docks late last night. My charter, a merchant vessel called Spire, packed to the gunwale with fine goods from distant shores, its captain, a stalwart and grizzled sailor whose dedication and leadership shone through in the motivation of his crew. Like a finely tuned machine, they deftly navigated the dangerous waters west of the Korvan River Delta. We first spotted the Grand Port while still at sea, miles before entering the river where it is located. The Kyran beacon shone brightly over the horizon. I do not know what magic powers that ubiquitous signal, but its intense light draws vessels from the seas like moths to a flame. As we sailed upriver, the port began to reveal itself to us like an eager maiden. Countless warm yellow lights gently illuminated polished sandstone structures, some more than 5 stories tall. Beautifully crafted statues and fountains proudly stood watch over the gardens and public spaces that flowed through the Grand Bazaar. The port itself was ablaze with activity. Containers hoisted to and from ships, dock workers and merchants closing deals, and crews taking leave in bars and fine brothels. Mere moments after I set foot on solid ground, for the first time in weeks, I was greeted by my local contact. A beautiful woman of middling age with an effortless and enticing gait further enhanced by the lovely gold-embroidered gown that hung over her figure like a graceful waterfall. She guided me away from the pier to the heart of the port city and my lodging for the night, which I politely offered to share with her. In advance, she graciously denied. Not even this could dampen my mood, however, and, albeit alone, I had the greatest night of sleep in my life. The bazaar gently rocked me to sleep with the melodic hum of its ceaseless activity. This morning, My path takes me north to the capital, Korvan City. I shall join a small caravan that travels there daily along the immaculate stone roads leading to the heart of the city from the four cardinal directions. I can see the path now as I sit and wait in the lovely garden bower just outside my lodging. Its stonework shines in the gentle morning sun. Immaculate golden-leafed braziers mark its boundaries as far as the eye can see. If the next leg of my journey rivals the first, it shall truly be the experience of a lifetime. Next note, Writings of Rion the Scholar, second entry. I arrived today at the heart of Korvan City after a grueling 3 days of travel, a journey which began on a high note as we traversed the lush oasis just beyond the walls of the Kyran docks. The Korvan capital is something else entirely. Lush stands of palms grace the shores of flowing streams fed by subterranean springs, which bubble up from the depths with an irrepressible ferocity. In the midst of a stark desert, it is truly a sight to behold. I've been told that this one source provides the cleanest of waters to the region. Apparently, an entire class of water merchants exists, with the sole duty of collecting the life-giving nectar from there and distributing it throughout the land. This is also where I had my first exposure to the curious and deep-rooted faith of the region. My traveling companions, the daily caravan from Kyran docks to Korvan City, insisted that we stop at a temple, known as the Sanctuary of Horran, positioned in the heart of the oasis. It was apparently crucial that they stop while the burning sun was at its highest point, the prescribed hour, to observe a daily ritual in which they give thanks to their God for his mercy and pittance. I can understand why a culture surrounded by such harsh and unforgiving lands would be grateful for whatever it is that has graced them to create such a stunning civilization. However, I quickly learned to be wary of these rituals, as the prescribed hour for worship is not one but several a day. I know now why the journey to Korvan City takes 3 days. On the second day of our journey, we passed through a smaller city on the outskirts of Korvan. This was truly an unusual locale. It appeared to be more temple than practical residence. I surmise it is a center for religious practice, perhaps where the local faith's most devout followers can go about their various rituals unhindered by the bustle of Korvan proper. Just beyond the temple city lies a vast network of tombs. I was told, by one of the caravan's drivers, that previous Korvan leaders and powerful devotees of the Korvan faith are buried there along with countless precious relics. Apparently, the valley was chosen as a burial site because the roiling hot blood of their god flows close to the surface there. I suspect there is an ancient magma flow passing beneath the valley, perhaps the remnants of a long-dormant volcano. These revelations are quite curious and worthy of further investigation. I shall hope to learn a great deal more about this faith, its practices and practitioners during my time in Korvan City. Next note, Writings of Rion the Scholar, third entry. Today was my first full day in Korvan City, and I must say I am as awestruck by its majesty as I was when I first landed at the Kyran docks. The focal point of the city is a grand temple dedicated to the Eldritch Sun, Yorvok, a deity I am unfamiliar with but one that dominates local theology. The temple's majesty is indescribable. It seems to dwarf everything in sight, even nearby mountains. And it radiates with such an energy that its heat can be felt even in the midday sun. Even I, a skeptic, find myself in sheer admiration. I've been told that the heat of the temple had dwindled for some years but has recently rekindled, a cause for celebration and ritual. I suspect it is built on a geological feature, perhaps a volcano or hot spring of some sort. I should very much wish to gain access to the inside, though, as I discovered by visiting several smaller temples around the city, this is unlikely to happen. The main temple holds particular importance and entry is strictly prohibited to outsiders. Though it appears to be the focal point of the local faith, Yorvok is by no means the only entity worshipped by the Korvan people. There also appear to be lesser gods whom the people call ascendants. What that means exactly, I am not clear on, and nobody had a straight answer for me either. The stories regarding these individuals vary, and not all of them seem to be holy men or even devout practitioners. By my observation, they may well be wealthy individuals that have bought their way to deification and the social reverence that comes with. Nonetheless, minor temples were constructed in their honor, and they are all worshipped in their own right and for various means, sometimes even before death. I should very much like to know what qualifies a person for a place of such honor, and so tomorrow I will be visiting several temples positioned around the main temple of the Eldritch Sun. If birthright will not grant me access, then perhaps the grease of a few coins will. Next note, Writings of Rion the Scholar, fourth entry. Following today's investigation of the tombs and temples of Korvan City, I must say I am more confused and, frankly, enthralled by the Korvan faith than I could have possibly imagined. Today, I had the privilege to bear witness to a ceremony at the Temple of Rhenet, where the Ascendant himself was present to perform the honorable rite. It is my understanding that Rhenet holds domain over the sun itself, and it is by his blessing that the sun rises each day to warm the earth and give life to the harvest. The ceremony itself was brief and involved the slaughter of 5 goats upon the golden altar, their blood spilled into the carving in the form of a many-pronged sun. Rhenet was a splendor to behold, his skin as golden as the suit of armor he wore. The armor glowed with burning energy, and yet, as some of the acolytes in the temple described to me from their blessed opportunities to lay their hands upon it, is cool to the touch. With the way he presents himself, it is easy to see why his followers believe this man to be a deity. The acolytes tell me that this is actually the 12th incarnation of Rhenet. His father was the 11th, and so on down the patriarchal chain of his family. Each of them had allegedly lived for centuries, and each had willingly given his life in the service of the Eldritch Sun. I was astonished to discover that the deification of this figure was his birthright. It does, however, lend credence to my suspicions regarding the true nature of these Korvan gods. The acolytes of this temple were more than eager to share Rhenet's history with me. I swear if I let them, they'd talk all day of his countless accomplishments and divine intervention. But what did catch my attention was the presumed rivalry between Rhenet and another deity they call Atef, the Lord of the Moon. As this rivalry heated up, Atef, I've learned, had slighted the Eldritch Sun and was thus banished from setting foot in Korvan City or to ever again feel the warmth of day upon his flesh. But the divine Yorvok was not without mercy. Once every 30 cycles of the sun, the disgraced Atef was to make pilgrimage to Korvan City and make an offering upon the Grand Temple steps. This is an extraordinary and incredibly creative explanation for the cycling of day and night and the wax and wane of the moon. If this strange practice of ascension weren't enough, the people of the Korvan Valley also appear to deify native animals and sometimes odd combinations of people and animals. The Korvan griffin is a particularly common target of this practice. The creatures apparently live in rigid hierarchical packs which elevate a singular, usually male, individual to an alpha known by the Korvan people as a sovereign. These griffin sovereigns are then worshipped by locals as minor deities. The intricacies of the Korvan faith are remarkable, but it must not go unmentioned that they all lead back to Yorvok in one fashion or another. I shall focus future investigations on this penultimate deity. Next note, Writings of Rion the Scholar, 5th entry. I can no longer count the days since I first arrived in Korvan City. I have been so enveloped by my work that I've lost track of the rising and setting of the sun. Rhenet would be so disappointed in me. I find it difficult to pull my attention away. I've hired a young man to bring me meals 3 times a day, and I must admit they are piling up outside the door to my chambers. My time is spent poring over mountains of texts and tomes, rites and ceremonies in an attempt to better understand the origins of this Yorvok. What I have learned thus far is truly fascinating. As far back as I can go, there seems to be no inconsistency to his presence or domain, no evolution of his worship. It is as if the core of the Korvan religion had somehow remained pure since its inception, quite unusual. It is that or its founders had put a great deal of effort into obscuring its true origins. The texts I've perused make it seem as though their rites and rituals are performed today as they were when first prescribed centuries ago. According to these texts, Yorvok reigns over the Eldritch realm, a plane of existence and parallel to our own of his very making. They say that no mortal may bear witness upon its splendors and live. Some fools have tried and paid the ultimate price for it. The texts warn of a many-eyed guardian that stands as a warning to all that would dare trespass upon the god's domain. Yorvok himself is said to be primordial, ancient, and eternal, a progenitor of all that mankind cherishes. From his eldritch throne, the Korvan god ascended numerous champions to enforce his rule. He had even been known to elevate those that dare challenge his worship as a means to appease them, turning former foes into steadfast allies. The now familiar names of Rhenet and Atef came up several times in the various tales spun around Yorvok's divine actions. The history of the Korvan faith is indeed generations in the making. The Eldritch Sun is depicted both as the blessed flame and the dreadful terror of destruction. It seems he is both adored and feared by those that show him reverence, and with good reason, though Yorvok is generally depicted as benevolent to his followers. There are numerous records of disasters or outright cleansings that were attributed to the god's retribution for mortals displeasing him. Some of these events seem eerily familiar, though I cannot recall why. I suspect there are similar mythos which I have been exposed to in nearby regions. There are also a number of rituals which bear a remarkable similarity to primitive practices I have researched in the past. This leads me to wonder if there are other tribes and civilizations that have been worshipping Yorvok since antiquity, but perhaps by a different name. This is a matter which will necessitate further investigation. Next note, Writings of Rion the Scholar, 6th entry. I have made a startling discovery while on my latest foray into the Korvan texts. While exploring the vast collection of the Korvan City Library, I briefly escaped the attention of its stewards and found my way to a closed-off archive. Among ancient birth records of some of the most prestigious Korvan families, several ascendants included, I unearthed a collection of texts that appear to shatter some of the core tenets of the very faith that is central to these people's lives. A large number of the pages were badly damaged, as if whatever ward cast upon them had violently dissipated. Strangely, the parchment itself appeared newer than some of the records I've seen. Perhaps someone had restored a damaged record at a later date. The bits that I could make out, however, painted a very different account of the early years of the Korvan faith. Yorvok himself was shown as a usurper, a conqueror of a realm he had no part in making. It is not entirely clear if the Yorvok that is spoken of today is even the same one described in those texts or whether that is the name given to the master of the Eldritch throne. Another curiosity was the description of the upheaval involved in such a transition of power, a whirlwind of creation and destruction within which were caught the unfortunate believers. Sadly, before I could complete my analysis of the text, one of the stewards discovered my presence in the closed-off archive and promptly chased me out of the building. What little I've managed to read offers some troubling conclusions. Is Yorvok's rule destined to falter as it had before? If so, will the same destruction consume these people when it does? It is truly a shame that I could not spend more time with those texts as they represented a fantastic culmination of my research into the origins of the Korvan faith. Alas, I must prepare to leave this land, and, though I have learned a great deal, I am certain there is more than a lifetime of knowledge hidden away here. The devotion and machinations of the Korvan people have proven to be one of my most fascinating studies. Next note, Writings of Rion the Scholar, final entry. Sadly, my time here has come to an end, and I find myself back at the Kyran docks where I first embarked on this most magnificent journey. I met once again with my captivating local contact. Catrice is her name, I've learned. And as if this marvelous place were eager to grant me a parting gift, she agreed to share in my final night's lodging. Tomorrow I shall once again board the merchant ship Spire and depart for distant shores. My destination, Cape Arene and the untamed lands that lie beyond. There I will attempt to make contact with the indigenous peoples and study their deep understanding of herbal medicine and insatiable penchant for human sacrifice. Wherever my travels take me, I shall certainly cherish my time here in the Korvan Basin. Next note, Yhania's diary. Father would have me hanged if he knew, but he should be none the wiser. And had called to me this evening, whistling like the evening sparrow from the garden below my window. He pleaded with me to join him, and I could not resist. Silently we snuck past the night guard, through gardens, over walls, out of sight, down to the docks where I paused for a moment in amazement. They were ablaze with activity. I couldn't believe my eyes. While the rest of the city slept, the docks positively hummed with activity. I'd never seen them at night. And had grasped my hand and snapped me out of my stupor. He led me down a secret path running next to the docks out past the last ship. From there we could see the bay stretching out before us. Its rippled surface sparkled in the light of Atef. It was more beautiful than I could have imagined. We could see ships entering the bay, their sails like pale specters against the jewel-filled night sky. It was Anhat's plan all along for us to go swimming. Swimming, of all things. Father would lose his mind. He's forbidden me to swim. He says it's inappropriate for a young woman. Anhat has promised to teach me, but tonight he guided me down to the shore so I could wade in up to my waist. The water was like a warm bath and a fish nibbled at my toes as I walked. Anhat swam out past the pier. So far, I could barely make him out against the glimmering water. I've heard there are massive fish that linger out there, waiting for a ship to drop scraps or for someone to fall overboard. But now I think those are mere tales people tell children to keep them from swimming. Why would they want to keep anyone from doing this? It's incredible. I will certainly teach my children to swim in the bay one day. Next note, Yorvok's letter to Bahan. Business is good, better than it has ever been. The new location has certainly paid off, at the heart of the marketplace near the spice merchants, during the week of ceremonies leading up to the Ascension no less. Business is good indeed. The streets and alleyways surrounding the shop are overflowing as thousands of people come and go, procuring provisions, fine linens, food and drink in preparation for the week's festivities. There are new customers too, and sellers of foreign goods. Many more than I remember from years past. I think word has gotten out that the temple has once again felt the warmth of the Eldritch sun, and so many have come from far and wide in hopes of laying eyes upon its splendor, or to make a tidy profit from the celebrations that follow. Tomorrow, I shall prepare a small caravan and display my wares at the foot of the temple, just like we used to do. The entire city will be gathered there to witness the chosen be selected from the temple's devotees. Everyone will gather there again, 3 days hence, when the procession enters the temple and the chosen will give themselves to the Eldritch Sun. Your great-grandfather used to tell me stories of these ceremonies in his day. He said that Yorvok himself presided over them, deep inside the temple, convening with the chosen and leading them down into the temple's burning heart. The divine would sometimes bless his worshippers with a brief appearance outside the temple. His mere presence was allegedly enough to cure the ill and strike blind the wicked. Such a sight certainly has not happened in my lifetime. I'm not sure anyone living, apart from the most devout priest, has ever laid eyes on the Eldritch Sun. Perhaps we are no longer worthy of such things. Perhaps he has looked into our hearts and seen that all too many have come only to enjoy the festivities, with no intention of truly paying homage or offering prayer. It is a different time, no doubt. Perhaps a good time. The city is as beautiful and radiant as it has ever been, and its people happy and successful. Carrot in a carrot in. I only wish you could be here to see it. I will send this by caravan to Chiron, where hopefully it will reach you when you return to port. Please, my son, consider coming to visit me. I would so love to hear of your adventures, often the far-off places you've seen, of the exotic cities you've visited. I know the life of a shipmate is a busy one, but do remember your old father. It won't be long before they take me to the sands and leave me for the good of the night creatures. They don't build temples for crusty old merchants after all. With all my heart. Your father, Yorvok. Next note. I stand before the Eldritch Sun. Here, atop this sacred spire, I bear witness to a tragedy. The land's wounds weep with the blood of the divine, his scarred flesh marred by the wickedness of false gods from a bygone era. The devastation is almost too much to behold, so intimately was the land tied to its benefactor. If it is ever to be healed, the Eldritch Sun must be released. Each dawn brings us closer to our goals. Last night I beheld the wondrous ascension of our Father. His screams echoed through temple halls. He too now bears the burning scars. The burdens our God carries are made lighter by his sacrifice. Others will soon follow, and I pray to the Sun that I am chosen next. May this flesh carry the will of Yorvok. May my hands be made into weapons to carve a path for his return. As I stand here atop the sacred spire, and the light of another dawn breaks through the twilight of night, I call to the heavens to grant me this honor. Yorvok, hear my prayers. Grant me your flame, and I shall rend our foes unto ash. Astros the Sun Herald. Next note. The Korvan Elegy, Part 1. We do not know where he hails from. Nobody we spoke to knows him. What drew this sorcerer to our lands confounds us, but it is his disregard for our ways, our very faith, that brought him to my attention. I've received numerous complaints of this, Soliel visiting religious sites and temples and showing utter disregard for procedure or ritual. It is almost as if he's searching for something, but what? I cannot say. His private home in the outer reaches of the Chiron docks, acquired with a satchel of foreign gold, I am told, has been sighted giving off an eerie glow in the middle of the night, much like the divine's eldritch light. I feel that it is only a matter of time before he conjures his own undoing by delving into matters he is not meant to and drawing the ire of the Eldritch Sun. I know not what folly the sorcerer plans, but he is quickly becoming a danger to the Korvan faith and a menace to its people. We must not let dissidents unravel what is presently a fragile situation. With the Eldritch Sun silent and none allowed to seek his providence, we must take these matters into our hands. I've dispatched the temple's elite guard to handle this concern. Nobody's going to miss a reclusive sorcerer, and besides, he is a stranger to these lands after all. What's one more unidentified body in the river? Next note. The Korvan Elegy, Part 2. Blindly have I stared beyond the curtain of reality. Agony met me part way. Beyond magnificence. For my achievement, I was punished. My wounds weep, but my eyes are open. That was to be my gift, my bane. For staring into the Eldritch Sun dutifully, I kept others at bay for centuries, filled their minds with horrors and visions of their own demise that they not repeat my mistakes. Yet this one confounds me. He is undisturbed, driven, power-hungry. The priests made threats, and he laughed in their faces. Such arrogance and such a fragile fleshy thing. And yet, he is brimming with potential. My open eyes peer through the possibilities. The one that holds the leash is wounded, broken. Given these circumstances and enough attempts, the mortal may eventually succeed in satisfying his hunger. But would his reign be any more just? His heart is as black as the writhing darkness, but he is not mad. He could be reasoned with. Many roads to follow, but only one shines clearly before me, but one leads to my ultimate victory. The Eldritch sun must set, and a new order must rise in its stead. The sorcerer, the priestess, and the guardian equal in naught. Yes, it will not be enough to merely bring the sorcerer to his goal. The ever-living flame needs to be extinguished from the path. His immortal heart shattered by betrayal, and the one that wraps her web around his very soul will be the very same that binds our prize. No doubts remain in the infinity. My course is set. Now I must merely ensure that the other pieces fall in line. All other threads will be cut, until the one true path remains, the path of Dreek. Next note, the Korvan Elegy, Part 3. Tragic is the tale of Ulzuin the ever-living flame, the right hand of the Eldritch Sun, for none have suffered as ruthless a betrayal as he. A warrior at heart, Ulzuin was restless with his newfound duties of keeping vigil over the temple of the Eldritch Sun, for what mortal could hope to threaten a god? And so he entertained himself within his temple, consuming wine and concubines faster than his attendants could hope to supply. That was until the priestess Baismiel attracted his attention. Her generous curves moved with confidence through the halls and her emerald eyes captivated the god, but it was her silky voice that got her invited to his chambers. There she stayed, sometimes for days, to the chagrin of the temple priests. Ulzuin was enthralled by the young priestess, shirking his duties and ignoring the complaints of his attendants. Nobody but Baismiel was allowed near him and none but her would be allowed to fill his lonely nights of vigil. That lust ultimately proved to be his undoing, for it was then that Ulzuin learned the true danger of mortals. It was on the fateful day when the earth ruptured and the sky turned to flame that Ulzuin realized his folly. Baismiel had promised him a glorious surprise, an indulgence unlike any he had yet experienced in his many lifetimes, which left Ulzuin recklessly far from Korvan City in the temple of the Eldritch Sun, sensing the upheaval. Ulzuin rushed back to his post, but he was far too late. The city was consumed by fire, and the great temple had been claimed by another. Ulzuin held at the sky, calling out to his father, Empyrean, for aid. But the skies were silent. In blinding agony and rage, Ulzuin flattened his temple and inflicted a wound upon the world that burns to this day, just as the wound Baismiel left upon his heart remained still. But where the vengeful god is now, perhaps only the witch gods know. Next note, the Korvan Elegy, Part 4. Let me regale to you the tale of Korvan's fall. For when the gods did battle and the world shook in their wake, it was the people of Korvan that paid the price of ambition. With Ulzuin off in distant lands, the temple of the Eldritch Sun was infiltrated, aided by treachery. The many-eyed fiend, the guardian of the hidden realm, clouded the minds of the temple's attendants and allowed two figures, a sorcerer and a priestess, to pass through unhindered. Together they crossed the gate to a reality beyond mortal words, the realm of the Eldritch Sun. There they found the primordial being gathering strength upon his throne. The sorcerer spared no time in unleashing his assault upon the wounded god. All the while the priestess cast her bindings upon him, and the infinite gaze filled his mind with visions of terror. The celestial being thrashed against his restraints and lashed out at his attackers, and as he did so the land above crumbled and spat fire. The air filled with sulfur, and the Korvan people fled for safety. The seas evaporated and rivers were replaced with molten rock, for the Korvan lands were as bound to the fate of Yorvok as flesh is to bone. For every injury the god sustained from the sorcerer's onslaught, a violent eruption shook the basin and engulfed its people, as he strained against the priestess's bindings, so the earth crumbled and changed, and as the guardian's visions consumed his very thoughts. So the Korvan people were ensnared by madness and nightmares. When at last the tremors subsided and the survivors looked up from amongst the ashes, they saw not one figure descending the temple steps in triumph, but three. And the fate of Cairn was forever changed. Next note, ruminations of the Primordial One. The raging thoughts of a primordial being emanate from this scrap of ruined flesh and flow through your mind, betrayed by my brothers and sisters. Empyrean, vanished to the eternal tapestry of creation. The war is over. We have lost. My kin, in their desperation, tapped into the forbidden void in order to turn the tide in their favor. They may be the victors, but the maddening whispers have them now. As for us, we are beaten. Nothing remains now but to hide and tend to our wounds. My temple still stands, my faithful remain loyal. With their worship and sacrifice, I regain my strength. It may take 100 years, 1,000, it matters not. My vengeance is inevitable. Roars of agony reverberate through your flesh. My loyal Ulzuin watches over me now, along with the many-eyed fiend I've bound to his fate. Mortal eyes must not see me in this state until I am ready to return to the stars and reap my vengeance. The rabble's faith must not falter. The clash of battle, the sizzling power of arcane spell work fills your ears before becoming deafened by the cracking of the very earth treachery. Betrayal. Where is Ulzuin? What sorcery is this? What has this witch done? When these bindings break, I will spill her blood and make her watch every drop. The scheming sorcerer she's allied with will burn on an eternal pyre for my amusement. As for the duplicitous Dreeg, the agony I've instilled upon him will be a mere trickle compared to the torment he will suffer for eons. Darkness clouds your mind, and heavy breathing fills your ears. He stirs, the dead one stirs, his blood roils within our creations, yearning to return. Even my captors can sense their impending doom. I will not be a lamb waiting for the slaughter. This farce has gone on long enough. The witch gods may have stolen what is mine, taken my faith as theirs, but there are still those in this world that yearn for my brother's return. I will harness their wishes, their desperation, and through them I will break these bonds and reclaim my throne. You hear the clanking of chains, the straining of metal as it is pushed to its limits and opportunity. Yes, a mortal pure of purpose, but so easily molded. He will be the harbinger of my return. I can already feel the bonds becoming brittle. The witch god's hold on me weakens. And when I am free, this world will again tremble before the might of Korvok. Next note, Sins of the Forgotten, first entry. Cast your eyes upon the splendors of Rayleoth and bear witness to the price of defiance, for by our own actions we forged our doom. As tendrils of the great darkness rip and tear at our world, as we stare into our oblivion, one truth stands above all others. When our ancestors cast out our god, they sealed our fate. As I look up at the starless sky and the subtle writhing of the devourer, I find myself reminiscing of brighter days. Days when the children would run in the streets and laugh instead of cowering in cellars with their parents, awaiting the inevitable. Gone are the boisterous calls of the bazaar, the chatter of folk going about their day. We've all fallen silent. Some resort to prayer to any god that would listen, but none will answer, for we had forgotten their names. Such was the decree of our ancestors. Their words painted the divines as cruel, malicious, and petty. But if it was by their will that our land exists, that we exist, what price is too high? Did our ancestors feel justified in their acts? In my final moments, I seek answers to these questions. None barred my way as I entered the royal library. The guards were long gone, searching for solace amongst their families and peers. Some of the archivists remained, unable to break routine even in our end of days. Quizzingly, they pointed me to the tomes I required. They felt no need to deny me knowledge at a time like this. What I uncovered shook me to the very core and opened my eyes to the hubris and defiance of our people. Next note, Sins of the Forgotten, second entry. All that we see, the animals that we breed for meat, the trees we harvest of their fruit, all were a gift of a nameless god. All this was bestowed upon us, and but one thing was asked in return: worship. The radiant entity stood before the first of our people, its light brighter than a star in the sky, and demanded fealty. Its arrival was heralded by a breathtaking meteor shower. All were in awe of their benefactor. All kneeled. Monuments were erected in its honor. The finest artists argued over which materials were most worthy of capturing a divine's countenance. Temples were constructed by the sweat and blood of our people. A grand ziggurat was built at the heart of Rayleoth to stand as the celestial's throne, and fanatic worshippers sacrificed themselves upon the temple steps to gain the god's favor. But as our society flourished and our people spread out across the vast lands created for them, they became discontent. The blessings of the divine were no longer witnessed by all. The boons of the harvest were not felt on the outer reaches of our empire. Disease became more common as our cities grew crowded. The people's ire was placed upon their divine. They felt that their worship warranted greater blessings, that the sacrifices their ancestors made earned them the right to a blissful existence. For a time, it seems the god was willing to appease its people, but as it granted boons to one group, another grew angry that their prayers were not answered first. Unrest became commonplace. Citizens turned to crime where once the land provided all they desired. And as they turned their backs upon the very god that gave them everything, the divine grew silent and reclusive. What I find peculiar in these retellings is that not once was the god's name uttered, and a few places I could find that referred to it directly had been blotted out with black ink. Our ancestors, it appears, were thorough in erasing evidence of its existence. Next note, Sins of the Forgotten, final entry. The earth beneath my feet trembles, and the few candles I have left are all the light I have by which to read these tomes and record my final hours. The archivists too have fled. To where? I do not know. Nowhere remains that is safe from the hungering darkness. My reading has brought me to the chronicles of the defining moment in our people's history, the day we vanquished a god. The date of this event is unclear, but it had to have been at least several generations ago, as nobody I've known had been alive to witness it. The texts describe the final years of the divine's presence as tumultuous. The stars grew dimmer, and the god was almost never seen outside the ziggurat. Some stopped worshipping it entirely, convinced that they had been forsaken and left to their own devices. Angry mobs took to the streets. Monuments were toppled, shrines desecrated, temples burned. Discontent turned to riots, and the riots into an angry mob that marched towards the grand ziggurat. Priests concocted powerful runes. The arcanists crafted spells they hoped could subdue a god. With death in their eyes, the people climbed the steps to the divine's throne. There they found it, angered by the desecration and revolt. But its once brilliant light had faded. The divine stood, towering above the people, and demanded fealty, but none bent the knee. Evidently infuriated by this defiance, the god cursed the very land and its people and vanished in an eruption of flames that toppled the ziggurat and claimed the lives of all that dared confront their deity. Rayleoth was rid of its divine. Its name was scoured from all records, all art. Its monuments were toppled and disfigured. The temple was left abandoned for nature to reclaim. What followed were months of grieving for the brave souls lost at the ziggurat, interspersed with celebration and feasts. Our once god was all but forgotten. It was not until centuries later, when our star faded and the hungering darkness encroached, that we realized what our ancestors had truly done. As I sit here under the waning light of my candles, I ponder a future where we are still under the heel of a celestial being. Not knowing the repercussions, would we, as our ancestors did, resent our god? Or would we show greater appreciation for the lands and boons we were given? As the darkness takes me, my thoughts spin with questions of what if, but there is no one left to answer. Next note, Splendors of the Eldritch Realm. To behold the realm of the Eldritch Sun is a blessing unto itself. To be granted the honor by the divine himself is another matter entirely. But so it was on the day I visited the temple of Rhenet to breathe of the sacred incense that I was visited with a vision of golden light and flame. It was without a doubt a manifestation of our divine, Yorvok. I am certain of it. With arms open wide, he welcomed me to witness the splendors of his realm. The temple walls dissolved around us, and I found myself stepping onto a land for which words are lacking. Massive winged creatures glided in the distance, their glistening feathers backdropped by a brilliant starry sky. Auroras of raw magic flowed between vast floating islands of trees and plants I've never seen before. I touched one of the roots, and raw arcane energies pulsed away from my fingertips. It was all too much for a mortal mind to absorb. I turned to our benefactor with tears in my eyes. I could tell I was visibly shaking. The Eldritch Sun took mercy on me, and I awoke abruptly to find myself surrounded by the temple priests. I had apparently started convulsing, and foam formed itself at the corners of my lips. The priests placed some herbs beneath my nose, which they say was what allowed me to awaken again. I told them that could not be true, as I was visited by the Eldritch Sun himself. I was looked upon as a madman. Why would I, of all people gathered at the temple, be granted such an amazing sight? For that I do not have an answer, but I cannot deny the gift I was given, even if the envious are in denial of its magnitude. Next note, Terrors of the Eldritch Realm. I must admit, at first I was thrilled with my discovery. To defy the witch gods and transport myself to their domain without their knowledge was an exhilarating prospect, even more so when I succeeded. What I did not account for, however, is the intrinsic instability of the realm I had traveled to. The land itself, as astounding to behold as it is, shifts within a vast emptiness. The portal I had ripped through the veil became unstable within minutes of my exploration. I gasped in dismay from a distance as it ruptured and vanished before my eyes. Without my reagents back on Cairn, I cannot possibly create another rift. My only chance now is to study the local flora in the hopes of discovering alternatives to my spell. This is a realm of raw wild magic, after all. Surely if the witch gods can harness it, then so can I. There are, however, more pressing concerns. While I seem to have evaded the infinite gaze of Dreeg, I have attracted the attention of local wildlife. Most appear to be harmless. Ravens with feathers that shimmer in the sunlight fly overhead, and lizard-like creatures skitter around my feet. but from time to time I hear the bushes shift violently as something larger passes by. Unnatural sounds echoing in the distance have sent a chill down my spine on more than one occasion. Worse still, the sounds are getting closer. I'm starting to believe now that my success was not so much due to outsmarting the gods themselves, but them knowing that I was doomed to begin with. This is not the domain of humans. It is an untamed realm teeming with creatures beyond comprehension, and I have become their prey. Next note, Carmac's final notes. Incredible, simply incredible. The internal functions of this vast creature are unlike anything I could have ever imagined. It appears it has actually developed a symbiotic relationship with the local fauna, allowing the Korvan scarabs to roam freely and their larvae to feast upon the refuse. I suspect it is a means for the maw to clear out undesired particulates. I've also become intimately acquainted with an undocumented form of worm that seems to burrow directly into the maw's insides. They appear to emerge only when a meal is present, as my crew quickly learned. Their deaths were most unfortunate, as I now find myself alone inside the creature, but the notes I've taken on the feeding cycle will be invaluable in my chapter on the great maw of Anat. Alas, the viscous material the worms extrude upon flesh seems to be having an ill effect upon my ability to walk. My legs now feel like gelatin. I'll have to gather a sample at the next opportunity for posterity. I expect it will not be long before the opportunistic feeders return. The very air here is a toxic miasma that disorients and overwhelms the senses, which makes intruders easy prey. I must admit, my hubris got the better of me in venturing inside this creature, but what self-proclaimed explorer could turn down an opportunity of a lifetime? While I will inevitably soon join the ranks of other prominent pioneers in the field of zoological exploration that lost their lives in the field, I fully expect that my work will feed the voracious curiosity of future generations. May they complete the picture which we started this day, and do so remembering the name of Carmac. Next note, last words of Herod, page 1. Tua, that son of a spider. He handed me the satchel with the seal. He told me I have served him well all these years, and that I was to have the honor of tossing the twice-cursed thing into the maw of the sands. And then, when I walked to the edge, the jackal hit me from behind. I must have blacked out. When I awoke, I saw no light above. I've now wandered inside this forsaken place for hours, and everything looks the same. I have no way to mark where I am or where to go. There must be some truth to the legends of this beast spanning the entirety of the basin. It is like a maze, except living and writhing. And by the depths of nights, the smell, like weak old vomit boiling beneath the desert sun. I've also taken note of several chambers filled with a sickly green fluid. The stench is strongest near them. I've since steered clear of them. Next note, last words of Herod, page 2. I had to pause in my exploration. I've lost track of time, and the air here is thin. I found the driest place I could lay down. I know not how long I slept, but I was awoken by large grubs spraying something viscous all over my clothes, almost like spider webs. Now my skin tingles where it was exposed. I dread to think what would have happened if I had not awoken when I did. Would I have been devoured in my sleep, my senses dulled by the strange sludge? The horrid things retreated when I brandished my sword, but I know they are not far behind as I walk. They are in no rush to have their inevitable meal. I thought my loyalty to Tuha would be how I forged my name in the ranks of the Temple Guard. I must have angered the priests somehow. But what could I have done? I can think of no altercation that would have them do this to me. Unless this fate awaits all who know the location of the seals? How do two people keep a secret? One kills the other. Next note, last words of Herod, page 3. My skin itches and burns, but I must not touch it. Those grubs did something to me, made my flesh soft like meat that had been boiled too long. My clothes and armor have started to rot and rust away. My hair is falling out. I think this living horror I am inside is slowly digesting me. I must hurry and find an exit before my life is spent, and when I do, I am going to slit that traitor Tua's throat like the dog he is. I know where they are taking the second seal, and I'll eagerly await their arrival in the shadows of that forsaken fortress. But I only have a little flame left, and I see it flickering, drawn by a subtle breeze. To find one's way out of a cave, one must follow the direction the torch is blowing. By the light of Ron, I will have my revenge. Next note, Journal of Captain Fod, page 1. I have arrived at my new post and completed my inspection of the fort and its troops. It is a small structure, but impressive in its armaments and the regiment's dedication to their assignment. I was told the fort has no formal name, and I was not to issue it one. It is not a matter I intend to question, as my orders were handed down from Vizier Erhaman himself. The regiment, known as the Blades of Atef, is a formidable one. I have watched them spar, and their skills in combat are frightening. But this comes as no surprise. They've all been trained from a young age as both assassins and soldiers. I have no doubt they will make for excellent guardians should we face any threats. The fort's most notable feature is the long double bridge built over water that flows in from the ocean. Beyond it lies the vault I am to guard with my life. As to what it contains, I was not given specifics, only that the object in question had not yet arrived. I'm not going to jeopardize my fortunes by asking too many questions. This is an excellent post. It is quiet, and the salt air is pleasant, much better for my lungs than the damp air of the cliffs of Abid. I do not think I could have asked for a better assignment. Next note, Journal of Captain Fod, page 2. A priest named Tuha arrived today. He is a hard and unapproachable man. He asked to have his entourage put up for the duration of their stay, which of course I agreed to. After a night's rest, he asked to be shown the premises, culminating in the underground chamber. As we made our way through the fort, I pointed out various features and soldiers of note. Priest Tuha showed little interest. Later on, he interrupted a demonstration by the blades and asked to be shown across the bridge. I shudder every time I cross that expanse. Despite my training, I cannot help but fear falling over the edge. The water below would break my fall, but there is no way back should I survive its icy depths. Once beyond the bridge, Tuha became very interested. He examined every rock, every crevice, pushing and pulling on bits of the mosaic adorning the walls. He was searching for weaknesses, I presume. We spent the remainder of the day there. I sent for food several times, but he touched little of it. Finally, late into the night, he was satisfied. Of what? I could not say, and I dare not ask. Next note, Journal of Captain Fod, page 3. On the following day, Priest Tuha had his entourage move in a large stone chest adorned with a griffin. It did not appear to have any hinges or lid. Whatever was inside, it was heavy. It took a team of 20 mighty men working tirelessly all day to move it. By the end, their backs glistened with sweat and blood from their toils. Once the casket was in place, the priest instructed them to go rest on the bridge. As they made their way down, Tuha motioned with his scepter and several of the blades of Atef descended upon them. They moved swiftly and mercilessly. Within moments, all the workers were bleeding out on the bridge stone, their throats slit before they even realized what had transpired. Tuha ordered their bodies to be weighed down with rocks and dumped into the waters churning below. The harshness and brutality were so sudden, I briefly watched in stunned silence. But then it occurred to me, the blades did not follow my orders. They followed his. The priest gathered what remained of his caravan, a mere handful of soldiers. I suspect they too were blades of Atef. I followed them back to the surface and inquired as to where the caravan was heading next. To that, he said, someplace deep that light has forsaken. He then gave me a look that made my blood run cold, a look that told me I should not ask such questions unless I wanted to join the rest of his caravan in the black waters below. Each night as I stand watch atop the fortress ramparts, I am reminded of the carnage that took place beneath, and the chilling realization that I am honor-bound to die in this place sets in. I find no comfort in the other denizens of the fort. To speak out about its secrets would sooner see me flayed by their vicious blades. In that, I serve alone. Next note, to his travelogue, page 1. I count the days since setting off from the gardens of Atef and the grim events of that fateful night. The Grand Magus Morganeth and his acolytes were felled by the wisdom and might of the temple wardens, but what the heretic unleashed cannot be so easily halted, it can merely be contained. While the eternal night lies dormant beyond the rune gate, the final burden fell to but one. If the Korvan people are to be truly free from this darkness, then none can know of where the seals lie hidden. In that, I have offered myself, for no other could be entrusted with this grave duty. Vizier Erhaman swore to pray upon the path of ascension that my sacrifice not be in vain, and granted me his holy sigil so that none will stand in the way of what I must do. I pity the men that now accompany me on this journey, for they do not know the heavy price they will soon be forced to pay. Next note, to his travelogue, page 2. Eternal Sun, protect me that I endure these crimes. An eternal pox upon the heretics that have caused this calamity and what I am forced to do. May Ulzuin thrust his burning fist into their souls that they may feel the agony of death once more. I've left my finest acolyte, Herod, to suffer within the desert maw. I do this knowing that my unexpected betrayal will drive him deep inside the terror beneath the sands in a vain attempt to seek escape and his revenge. He was always so driven and resilient and loyal. Now I've repaid his long service with agony. May the first seal be devoured over 1,000 years. The second seal's location offered little respite from the evils I was duty-bound to commit. There, the lives of my caravan were forfeit so that their tongues may never slip the location of the cursed object. While this was not done by my hand, the blades of Atef saw to the grisly deed. Their every move felt as if I was the perpetrator. I now set out with what remains of my entourage for the final location, where the third seal will forever lie beyond the reach of the blessed sun, and where I will remain to atone for my sins. Next note, to his report, page 1. When the summons arrived to discuss what had transpired in the gardens of Atef, I could not believe my own eyes. That was once a place of festivities and worship. I still remember the first time my father took me to see the brightly colored lanterns of the night festival, a tribute to Atef who would never again see the light of Ron. But this darkness, this is twisted beyond comprehension. The Grand Magus perverted the worship of Atef into something unrecognizable, and for that the Vizier handed down the most serious judgment, exorcism by fire. At his command, I've set out with an entourage of priests and temple wardens from the great Korvan city. We will purge this heresy and all those that dared defy the Korvan faith. Next note, to his report, page 2. We stand before the gates to the gardens of Atef, and immediately a sense of wrongness surrounds us. There is a foulness in the air that cannot be described by mortal senses. Many had already fled this befouled place. Those less fortunate had already succumbed to the madness and required the release of death. Our orders were clear. No trace of the corruption of night is to escape the valley. With a heavy heart, we do what is necessary for the good of the Korvan people. The closer we get to the court of the Magi, the stranger the sights become. The men are uneasy, but the horses are inconsolable. The remainder of the journey will be on foot. Next note, to his report, page 3. What we found inside the gardens defies comprehension. Words fail me at the sight of this depravity. The earth itself has been eaten away by nothingness. The windblown sands fall off the shattered edges and vanish into the abyss beyond. Several men have balked at the sight, their morning's rations mixing into the already unbearable tapestry painted before us by Morganeth's heresy. The local wildlife has succumbed as well. Creatures of the night that would be a natural sight in any other part of the basin are distorted and wrong here. They claw at their own flesh in some vain attempt to escape the madness of their new reality. I have no doubts we will be reduced to a similar writhing mess should we remain here too long. The 7 acolytes to Morganeth's folly were a prime example of this insanity. As we approached, we could hear them babbling in strange tongues. They stood gathered around a pile of human bones as if chanting a ritual. A dark aura emanated from them that was reminiscent of the void tearing this place apart. We took no chances. If the Magi were performing a spell, then it was best that they not finish it in our presence. We greatly outnumbered them, even having several of the temple stewards among our number, and despite having the element of surprise, the raw power on display by these traitors was astounding to behold. Scores of my men vanished in an instant. Others were torn apart by hungering tentacles. But by the light of the Eldritch sun, we were triumphant. What bit of darkness these fools tapped into has been expunged by fire, and their forsaken souls trapped by the priests. They will know no rest. Death will offer them no release from the nightmare they had created. While this small victory brings what remains of us some solace, we all know that the greater threat still awaits deeper inside the realm of night. The Grand Magus Morganeth still stands. Next note, to his report, page 4. The malevolence is palpable this deep into the abyss. You can feel it in the air, like a whisper that gnaws at you, a slow blade to the nerves. I have seen it in the eyes of the men. A harrowed look, pale and wide-eyed. Last night, the whole of the camp was awoken by a ghastly shrieking. One of my captains was carving his own arm like a meat shank, screaming about the bugs under his skin. Several others had wandered off without a word to their superiors. We never saw them again. Further tragedy struck as we neared Morganeth's foul altar. One of the temple stewards, a mighty construct blessed by the Eldritch sun, suddenly collapsed as unearthly tendrils wrapped themselves around its legs. Several of my men approached to investigate only to find themselves at the mercy of our very ally. The steward rose again, but its eyes no longer shone with the brilliance of the temple fire. Instead, they were the black of the abyss, claimed by the foulness threatening to consume us all. Those nearest to the steward were the first to fall, cleaved in two by its mighty halberd. Several more turned to ash when the construct exhaled the void itself. Ironically, it would be the very blessings of the Eldritch sun that proved the steward's undoing. With a fiery rune emblazoned in the air, I forced the guardian to the edge of nothingness, and several of our magi blasted it with spells and sent it plummeting into the same void that now controlled it. If such corruption can claim even our mightiest guardians, then by the light of Ron, we must hurry. Next note, to his letter. Naiema, my desert flower. How my heart aches to be with you and the children one last time. I fear this letter will not find its way to you, but I must write down my thoughts nonetheless. You see, I've lied to you when I set out beyond the Apesh Mountains. I am not returning home. One more task remains that will take me to where even the light of our divine cannot reach, where I will forever remain. While I cannot speak of what I must do, please know that it is of the most vital importance in order to keep you safe, to keep us all safe. I am sure you think I exaggerate, but after what I have witnessed, I no longer think there are limits to the evils mankind is capable of. In that, I am no exception, for the path I have undertaken is dark with the blood of my fellow men, men that trusted my every command. Know that in my final moments, I will think only of your beautiful smile. Your face will be the only sun I will worship for the remainder of my days. Give the children my love. Yours, until the sun burns cold and the stars go dark. Tuha. Next note, Morganetha's invitation. The Grand Magus sure has a way with words. I fear that I am merely caving to his flowery speeches and excessive flattery, but if 6 others had already joined him in this endeavor, then there must be some merit to his pursuits. His methods have always been unorthodox, for lack of a better word, but if we are to topple a system that's been in place for centuries, perhaps unorthodox is exactly what we need. I too tire of the chokehold the Korvan priests have upon the study of the vast celestial veil. I think they often forget they are not gods. What gives them the right to judge us for wishing to know more of our makers? Do they fear what lies we may uncover? And now, with rumors of the temple of the Eldritch sun growing cold, perhaps we are at the precipice of change our stagnant society desperately needs. The prospect of being part of the push over this veritable edge has my spine tingling with the possibilities. Magi Arisha. Next note, Morganetha's Lessons, page 1. Brothers and sisters of the moon, I implore you to listen. Like me, you surely feel the absence of the Eldritch sun's warmth upon our lands. The priests may deny it, the Vizier may create spectacles upon the temple steps, but we all know the undeniable truth. The Korvan people have been abandoned before the vastness of the celestial veil by an uncaring god. But will we stand idle as our enemies encroach upon us? Of course not, brothers and sisters. We are the Korvan people. Our steel is mighty, and our knowledge of the arcane is without compare. Join me in the gardens of Atef. Let us cast down the shackles of the priests sitting upon their golden thrones in Korvan City. We will carve a new future from the tapestry of fate, one forged by our own hand and not by the whims of fickle gods. Next note, Morganetha's Lessons, page 2. Fear not, my magi. While we may be delving into the unknown, we are not doing so blindly. Here, within the gardens of Atef, the iris of night offers us a glimpse into the tapestry beyond. Watch as the stars dwindle and fade at its edges. Witness as the insatiable darkness eats away at what the gods have wrought. That, my friends, is true power, the power to unravel even the will of the gods. This is what we seek and what we will learn to master. In that, I will be your honored guide. I have peered into its infinity and know how to navigate its pitfalls. It is only natural to fear this emptiness, this absence of all things. But if you give yourself fully to unraveling its secrets, we will surpass even the gods the priesthood claims to speak for. Do not mistake my enthusiasm for rash action, however. It is imperative that we proceed with caution, not just for the integrity of our spellcraft, but to shield ourselves from the prying eyes of the priesthood. So that each of us knows we do not stand alone, I have forged 8 rings. These jewels not only serve as a symbol binding us in this conclave, they will ward us against unwanted attention from our plane and the one beyond. Next note, Morganetha's Lessons, page 3. It is as I told you, my brothers and sisters in darkness. The betrayers inevitably learned of our actions, and they come, oh they come. They bring their runes and their constructs of mortal war, but they will soon learn that one cannot defy the ultimate truth. The abyss calls to us all. We may fight it, resist it, but in the end, we will all be consumed by it. The gods learned this truth long ago, and even they must ultimately submit. Their stars will not defy their fate forever. The conduit of eternal night is complete. Its sunlight will bask the stars in shadow and usher in the unmaking. It matters not what happens to us this day, the betrayers at the temple are too late. The barrier is no more. The great devourer has tasted of our bounty and will be held back no longer. They may rip and tear at our flesh, they may even triumph over our mortal forms, but they have not peered into the abyss as we have. They know nothing of what awaits and what is yet to come. Go forth into eternity, my magi. Next note, Memories of Morganeth. Merciful Atef, tell me what I must do. The tendrils of night claw at my waking thoughts, and the abyss fills my dreams. The world of day no longer comforts me. I've peered beyond the far reaches of the tapestry of the gods. I knew not what to expect, but I expected something. What awaited my sight was the absence of anything at all. In this void, I found answers to questions I did not know I asked. Words filled my mind that carried no meaning, and yet I was familiar with them, like the comfort of a warm hearth on a winter's night. How could I deny such beauty, such perfection? The tapestry of the gods is a disease, a stain upon the uniformity of the abyss. To defy it is sheer folly. The lies of the gods have been lifted from my eyes, but others stand blind around me. They too shall be made to see. No, no, they will not understand. They will falter and everything will shatter. They cannot merely be shown the truth, they must be remade to serve it. Yes, I will bind them in darkness, bind them to my will, so that all can be brought to the Unmaker's embrace. The anointed hour arrives, yes. They come, but they come too late. The iris points the way to the dawn of eternal night. When the devoured stars align, the tendrils of hunger will unravel the very earth, and the end shall begin as it must. At the conduit, the shadows take form, the seven will rise evermore. And when they come for me, the fools will all be made to see. Morganeth the Unmaker is here, and here forever he shall be. Next note, Scion of the Sands. High Priest Tua has made the ultimate sacrifice for the safety and integrity of the Korvan faith, but we must not allow ourselves to grow complacent in the wake of this heresy. While the Korvan people may never learn of Morganeth's folly, the land will not forget the crimes committed against her. The black wound festers beyond the barrier, eager to spread its malevolence. This must never come to pass. With the blessing of our elders, I invoke the ancient rites. The infinite Korvan sands will be called to rise up in defiance of this blasphemy. They shall bear a new guardian, a scion of the sands that will embody the wrath and fury of the Korvan lands. In this, we are united, in this we beckon. Kalagadra, a name which will strike terror into the creatures of night. Next note, the Darkness Writhes. By the light of Rion, by the waters of Yhania, the emptiness before us moves. Its tendrils seep into my very thoughts. I stare into what should be empty blackness, and yet whispers fill my mind. How can mortals stand before such raw malevolence? The answer is as plainly before me as the sands beneath my feet. We cannot. The abyss is inevitable, terrible, and yet beautiful. At first, I was terrified of its portents, but as my eyes adjusted to the nothingness, I realized that we are all meant to become as one with it. I teeter on the edge of the cobblestone path, and I no longer fear what awaits all of us, even the gods. I go now to my destiny. Next note, Confluence of the Magi. The world around us is a lie perpetrated by the evils of the priests. We alone stand as heralds of truth in a shattered reality, scions of eternal night. Morganeth may have opened our eyes to the truth, but the whispers have opened our hearts to the solution. It rides outside and within, the black tendrils of eternal night cradle the unmaking of all. The flutes of despair sing their chorus, and we alone dance to their blissful tune. The betrayers come for us now, but they have not yet seen the beauty of the abyss. But they will, they all will. Even as the end to our mortal forms rapidly approaches, the whispers of Morganeth emanate from within our minds. We were deceived, for in the forging of the rings Morganeth told but 7 lies. His ring was made to be above all. He is the prime, the one to bring us all to the abyss, and the one who will bring us back. They come, they come. Let the chorus of unreality begin. Let them hear the whispers too, for in the end of all things, only nothingness remains.